you also notice economic prosperity. The European historians of the history of economics, including now the latest encyclopedias on the history of world economics, will tell you that till the 1850s, India and China had about 2/3 of the world GDP. India had like 25%, China had 30%, something like that. And what's now called the West was less than 20%, including Europe, US, and so on. And this only, it took about 100 years, I think from 1750s to 1850, that is when the decline came, and there was an industrial revolution in England, a whole lot of transfer. India from being an export country became an importing country. England from being an import-oriented country became an export-oriented country. That 90-year, 100-year period is when things shifted. But until that, for thousands of years, India and China were very advanced in economy. And this is written and documented by lots of traders and lots of ancient historians. And the reason I often, when I give talks in schools in this country, I often say, well, where does India fit in American history? And I'm surprised that hardly any history teacher, all these, once I was made chair of the Asian Studies in the state of New York by the governor. And so he had his sister, that particular governor, his sister was a teacher, educator. So she brought all these leading educators to a discussion on this. And I said, I first want to ask you, when you're teaching, why do you want to teach India, and how would you teach India in the context of American history? Not one of them started by saying, you know, that's what Columbus was looking for. Not one of them thought of that. It was not positioned that way in their head. So then I had to tell them that the Queen of Spain was like a venture capitalist looking for a big intellectual property breakthrough, which would be worth a lot. And that was a sea route to India. And because the sea route would bypass the land hassles of the land route. And the reason the land route was a hassle is because the Ottoman Empire, which was Muslims, the Ottoman Empire, controlled Central Asia, Eastern Europe. So the land route, which was traditionally called the Silk Route, from China and India on one side and Europe on the other side, blocked by the Ottoman Empire. So either they would not let things through, or they would charge 20 times the price. They would decide as a strategic advantage. They had access to the Indian and Chinese goods. Europeans did not. It was a huge problem because Europe needed these things. And there was no sea route at that time. There was no Suez Canal. There was no around Africa, none of that. So the Columbus journey was a venture capital journey to find a sea route to India. And that is how this whole thing started. So you see, if you look at, and then Vasco da Gama took the route around Africa. One of them wanted to take the route across the Pacific, across the Atlantic, and the other one around Africa. So going east and west respectively, hoping to find India, and didn't know that American continent is in the middle, and the rest we all know what happened. So you see, India has been a very important part of world history as a positive economy, as a source of knowledge, as a source of technology, as a source of all kinds of things. The Middle East had huge amount of Indian workers. Today they are workers of different level, but you know, you will see university professors, mathematicians, astronomers, medicine people, doctors, all kinds of people in the medieval era in the Middle Eastern countries coming from India, being acknowledged as such. And a lot of the Indian knowledge translated into Arabic and Persian became part of the Middle East knowledge system, and then centuries later would be translated into European languages like trigonometry, geometry, algebra, a lot of these things which Europeans feel they got from the Arabs, and therefore they misclassify it as Arab numerals and so on. Okay, what they don't know is that the Arabs themselves got it from India, which the Arabs acknowledged. Al-Jabr was an author whose book starts off by saying that this is being translated from Malayali, and that book by Al-Jabr when it later gets translated into Latin and so on, that knowledge becomes known as algebra. So this India is a source of knowledge for the West, for the Middle East, and all over Asia. I mean, the people who never try to hide Indian contributions, you will find them in China, Japan, Korea, Southeast Asia today. It's very interesting. When my foundation used to do these world conferences, once we got a delegation, I think 15 years ago, we got a delegation from China on Vedanta philosophy, Hindu philosophy, ancient mathematics, Vedic science, all these kind of things. There were like quite a lot of them. And I thought that maybe they must be dissidents, or they must be people that have run away from China, and maybe these things are not allowed. So I spent a lot of time getting to know them, and they told me it's just the opposite. The Chinese government is encouraging all this because they think it's part of their history, and they want to bring in all this knowledge from all the sources. And there's a large amount of study of Indology in China, which is very respectful of the Indian sources, not like some of the Indology in this country. So in Southeast Asia, you go to Southeast Asia, you'll find a huge respect for Hindu and Buddhist origins of so much knowledge. And we think of Buddhists having taken Buddhism to all over Asia, East Asia. But when the monks were going, they were taking samples of food and agriculture, they were taking music, they were taking linguistics, they were taking mathematics, astronomy. It was a huge amount of knowledge export. So places like Nalanda, which is a Buddhist university, would be like today's Duke University, Harvard University, Princeton University. They were like Ivy Leagues. And if you look at the history of Nalanda, it's written by foreign students. There are volumes written by students in Mongolia, students in Cambodia who had gone, and students in China who had gone there and studied and brought back great accounts of what the curriculum is and what is being taught. So from that you can reconstruct what was going on in Nalanda. It was attracting the cream of the brightest students from these countries. And the Queen of Cambodia was quite a regional power at one time. The Queen of Cambodia had endowed a whole college, built a college within Nalanda University for the sole purpose so her brightest students could be sent, live there, bring the knowledge back. So like today, people from around the world would go to some Ivy League in the US and bring the knowledge back to India. That used to be the way it was in India, where people from other countries used to come.